Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And friends, welcome back. We're back in Murray, Calloway County, talking to attorney Jeff Roberts. And Jeff, at the beginning of the spring, we generally do a motorcycle tips, getting ready to get your bike out and get back on the road. You've ridden motorcycles for many years, but let's just kind of talk about some of the causes of motorcycle accidents. We still have, a month or two, before the season really gets a little bit too chilly for riding. Of course, there'll be some of those outliers out there who want to keep on going, but as long as it's not icy and snowy out there. But, as someone who's handled these kind of cases for over 30 years, you see a lot of motorcycle accidents. And we've got some great roads back here. We've got some interstates. We've got county roads, state roads. But you tend to see patterns. And so let's address maybe, 4 or 5 of the major reasons for some of these motorcycle accidents. So welcome. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Jim. Yeah, and you're correct. Kentucky's a beautiful state, and West Kentucky especially, in my opinion, and I'm probably biased, but is a beautiful area of the state and of the country, and there are some wonderful roads to ride motorcycles on around this area of the state and across all over the state of Kentucky, for that matter. From there, and you're right, through my 32 years of practicing personal injury law, I have seen patterns kind of develop as to where we see these type of accidents occurring there. And one of the biggest ones that I see is people making left-hand turns in front of a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Or pulling out from an inferior roadway as well. It comes in there. But the left-hand turns you see that where the person is driving down, the motorcyclist is driving down the road, and then a car or truck coming toward them turns left right in front of them because they're just not paying attention.
Well, and that's the thing. A motorcycle has a thinner profile than a car. And, sometimes if you're on autopilot and you're just zoned out, unfortunately, we've all probably done that from time to time. When there's a motorcycle around you, it's even more dangerous because that motorcycle doesn't have nearly the protection around them that a person driving a car and their passengers. You're exposed, and it's going to be serious.
Yeah,
I don't want to say catastrophic, but it could be.
Can be catastrophic. And frankly, as I think we've discussed before, sometimes in the tips section, and I do like to provide the tips, as you've indicated, I've ridden motorcycles most of my adult life, and I enjoy riding motorcycles. But when you're on a motorcycle, if you have a wreck going 40 miles an hour, you're going to be much more significantly injured than statistically speaking, going to be much more significantly injured than somebody inside a passenger automobile with their seatbelt on involved in a 40-mile-an-hour collision. Not saying that both aren't going to be injured, but statistically you're going to have much more significant injuries if you're the motorcycle rider in that setting. But the profile is certainly a big part of that. The motorcycle is a smaller profile for people to notice, which is one of the reasons why motorcycles headlights are on all the time. You can't, I don't know the last time they made motorcycles in the U.S. where you could actually turn the headlight completely off. Certainly before I ever started riding, because every motorcycle I've ever had, the headlight is automatically on. You turn the key on, crank it, that headlight is turned on. At that point, you can turn it between high beam and low beam, but you cannot turn that headlight completely off on a motorcycle. And that's for safety reasons is why that is, because that headlight being on, it makes it a little easier for people to spot as it's coming toward them, and which is the same reason to some extent a lot of cars have running lights on that are on during the daytime. It just that headlight shining or the running light shining makes it it stands out a little more, so it makes it a little easier to see. But unfortunately, some people are not. Just aren't paying the attention that they should be paying when they're driving down the roadway, especially if you're going to make a turn left into the other lane to turn into a driveway or turn into another road. You need to be making sure of that and being very, very careful. at this, anytime. It doesn't matter what time of the year, but certainly when motorcycles on the roadway, take a little extra care in looking out for them.
Yeah. So again, as you said, it's the left-hand turn, and again, that could be a car that's riding in the same direction as you, and they make a left-hand turn and they turn right in front of you because they didn't see you in the side lane there, or it's oncoming traffic. They're making a left-hand turn, and they turn in front of you.
Right.
And again, same result, unfortunately, but left-hand turns.
Yes.
Left-hand turns.
Yeah.
The second one that we're going to talk about today is when a car is pulling out in front of you. And again, a lot of times we talk about this in intersections. We see that a lot. And it's
Yes.
kind of the same reason, right?
Exactly the same reason people, when they pull up, if you pull up to an inferior road where you've got a stop sign and the other road does not have to stop. You've got traffic control device on your road. They don't have one on their road. And so if you pull up there and, I live out in the county here. I'm on Highway 94 frequently because to go to and from my office to my home, and there's a lot of small country roads that come into Highway 94 there where they stop in 94 goes. You see it on 121, you see it on Highway 80, a lot of roads that are that way. And if you're driving down, on the motorcycle, somebody pulls up and stops, and either they try to cross over in front of you, or they going to turn right, go in the same direction you are, but you're way too close to them, or again turning left in front of you, but they're pulling out in front of you, and that is in front of a motorcyclist. And again, it gets back to just not paying attention. Some people slow and go stop signs. You should never do that. But especially if you're pulling out onto an inferior roadway, you definitely don't want to do that. And people just don't pay attention. Even I've seen them cross 4-lane when I've been riding on motorcycles, and I've represented clients where this has happened, where they cross in 4-lane roads and they pull out and they keep on going right in front of somebody on a motorcycle, and they just don't pay. They're not paying any attention to the traffic coming toward them.
Well, I think, even if you spot the motorcycle, you don't realize, I've always asked, how can people get hit by trains? It's a big vehicle coming. You just don't realize the speed. And sometimes that narrow profile, they just get there a lot quicker than you expect because you're just not paying attention.
I'm kicking you off my juries.
I'll have to remember that story when they're trying to see me. So,
but yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
People sometimes misjudge the speed of a motorcycle, and part of it's because you're kind of used to glancing to some extent, and if you don't see it, but even if you do see it, you don't pay enough attention to it to see how
really
fast
register.
it's traveling from that perspective. And so, yeah, and then they think they got plenty of time to cross or whatever, and then the motorcycle closes distance a little quicker for them. Than they anticipated. Again, it's the person who's pulling out and in front of the motorcyclist job to make sure from that standpoint. And when it happens, hopefully the motorcyclist has enough time to slow down and avoid the collision. But unfortunately, that doesn't always occur, and you have some significant collisions then. So.
Right, and it's even worse if there's a passenger on the bike. Now you've got two people that are going to be very seriously injured and sometimes fatal. Jeff, in previous episodes, we've talked about traffic fatalities, and I'll put a link in the show notes to those episodes. And then also there are all sorts of different insurance issues that come up with motorcycles. And if we want to digress for just a minute, Kentucky, we're fortunate as drivers in Kentucky to have no fault coverage. You want to talk a little bit about what that is, but then how does that affect a motorcyclist because they're at a disadvantage?
Correct. No fault. What is frequently referred to as no fault coverage is a very, very small part of Kentucky's motor vehicle law, and it's essentially it's referred to as no fault benefits, personal injury protection or PIP benefits, or basic reparations or BRB benefits, all referring to the same thing, and that's benefits that you purchase. It's mandatory coverage for an automobile, truck. It's mandatory for everything but a motorcycle. And what that coverage does is it pays the first $10,000 of medical bills, lost wages, and a few other things, lost services, etc. But primarily, medical bills and lost wage benefits is covered by that. It's optional coverage for a motorcycle. if you do not purchase that coverage and you're on your motorcycle and you're involved in an accident, then you lose your ability to recover that first 10,000 of medical and/or lost wages. There, the same with you lose that also if you're involved in a car accident and you don't have insurance on your vehicle, so you don't have that basic reparations or PIP coverage.
Again, that's because you were driving without insurance
Because
in that scenario.
Yeah, because you were driving without insurance. So if you don't have that coverage because you don't have insurance on your vehicle, you lose that 10,000, and it's regardless of whether it's a car or a motorcycle. If you've got car insurance, you've got that coverage because it's mandatory coverage for a car. On a motorcycle, you've got to make sure you have that coverage because, frankly, they'll write policies and they don't tell the person, if you don't have this coverage, it costs this amount of money. Do you want this coverage? But they don't say if you don't have this coverage, you don't get this 10,000 of medical and/or lost wages. You lose your ability to recover those benefits, and so I see motorcycle riders frequently who do not have that coverage.
Right. One, because of the cost, but two, it may just have been a misunderstanding about what they're giving up. And again, friends, if you're listening to this, when we talk about the motorcycle tips, which again we do in the spring of each year, Jeff does talk specifically about insurance and things like that. So again, I'll link to that in the show notes. If you're a motorcyclist, you may want to spend a few minutes listening to that as we go on. Jeff, let's go to the third cause of motorcycle accidents, at least in your history anyway. And this is kind of a deep bucket here. We're just going to generally call it reckless driving, but there are a whole bunch of different aspects to reckless driving, and we're generally talking about the cars around you, not necessarily the motorcyclist. High speeds,
Yes.
That's one of the big ones.
Yeah, speed, driving at high rates of speed can be extremely dangerous because whether you're on the motorcycle or you're in the car. It can be extremely dangerous when you're driving at high rates of speed because you don't expect somebody on a 55 mile an hour speed limit road to be going 90 miles an hour. And so you're going to close distances much quicker, and so and that can cause problems and cause wrecks from that, and you just don't have your vehicle under as well as control, especially on smaller roadways. From there, but what you also see frequently with people driving at high rates of speed is they are driving even more recklessly. If they're on a 4-lane road, weaving in or out of roadway, out of the lanes, trying to move forward, and shifting from lane to lane without looking and paying attention, and that can be extremely dangerous for a motorcyclist. If you're driving down and then somebody just shifts right in front of you because they didn't look in their, they didn't check their blind spot, didn't look and see where you were at, and comes across and hits you on the side and takes you down that way. I've seen that unfortunately frequently on interstate roadways or parkways. From that, but even on roadways that aren't limited access, like Highway 80 or Highway 641, that are 4-lane roads, you still see people doing that from that perspective. And
well, I think the other aspect to that is you don't give the motorcyclist a chance to react offensively. You know, to slow down or to kind of get, if there's an extra lane they can get into and kind of avoid it and just kind of let you get on down the road so you're not a threat to them anymore. If you're not using your signals, if you're being overly aggressive in your lane changes, again, it's everybody on the road that you're a risk to, or you're a threat to, I should say.
Right.
But for a motorcyclist who doesn't have a lot of metal around them, when they go down, they're going to go down hard.
Yeah, exactly. And then, unfortunately, I've seen it similar even on a 2-lane road where the person is driving recklessly and at a high rate of speed, and then they're passing. They pull out to pass somebody and doesn't see the vehicle coming toward the motorcyclist coming toward them, or they pull out to pass. When they pull out to pass, it's not a good passing lane, a long enough passing lane, and then they didn't realize there was a motorcycle in front of the car in front of them, and they pull out to pass and start forward, and then got a car coming toward them and a motorcyclist over here, and they try to speed up to jump in front of the motorcyclist or something. The motorcyclist may not see that from that because they're not changing lanes.
Well, even a motorcyclist has a blind spot, just like a car.
Absolutely, yes. And so, they may not be aware that the person's trying to get around them at that point in time and then swerve right back in front of them, and that can be very. I mean, if they clip that front tire,
Yeah.
when they switch back in front, it can be deadly for the motorcyclist.
Game over, unfortunately. Jeff, another thing with reckless driving comes down to, if the person in the vehicle in the car is driving under the influence.
Yes, under the influence, distracted driving, but under the influence, if it's frankly, it doesn't matter if you're under the influence of alcohol or under the influence of some sort of an illicit drug. Your ability to react is different, and you're much less likely to notice a motorcyclist coming towards you and turn in front of you, or pull out or do something of that nature, or to frankly get too close to them. And driving intoxicated, regardless of why you're intoxicated, is dangerous for everybody on the roadway. It's dangerous for pedestrians. And there's absolutely no reason for it in today's society for people to be driving. I don't think there ever was a reason for it, but now, I mean, even in a community as small as Murray, in Mayfield, and other small communities, there are taxi cab companies or cab companies there. You've got the Lyft and the Uber drivers in a lot of areas nowadays that you can call. And even if you don't, or if you don't have the money for that, you can call a friend.
Yeah.
And have a friend come pick you up. And if you can't call a friend to come pick you up, you can probably call somebody that's just an acquaintance or a coworker that may not even like you. They're probably going to say, "Yeah, I'll come get you to keep you from driving drunk."
Yeah,
down the roadway.
absolutely. There's enough awareness these days.
There's enough awareness these days that there's absolutely no reason to get behind the wheel. And frankly, there's no reason in my opinion, no reason for a bar or restaurant to let anybody leave and get behind the wheel while they're intoxicated. I fought a lot of and there's liability on those companies for doing that, but somebody shouldn't be served to the point of excessive intoxication, but they certainly shouldn't be allowed to walk out and get in the vehicle either.
I'm with you. And as we were preparing for this episode, we were discussing the fact that Kentucky recently passed a medical marijuana law, which I guess at the beginning of 2025, I guess that goes into effect right around there somewhere.
I think so, or somewhere in that time frame. Yes, I know the applications for to be a dispensary or grower and some other things, a producer. I think early July is when they opened up that process, and so I don't know when that selection is going to take place. I haven't heard of it occurring already. It may have, and I just didn't know it because I hadn't been keeping up with it. But yes, medical marijuana has passed. It's going to be coming into being at some point in time. I think sometime in July in 2025, if I'm not mistaken, is when that's going to come in. But even then, you're not allowed. If you got a prescription for marijuana, it does not allow you to drive a vehicle while you're intoxicated with marijuana or high from marijuana or whatever you want to refer to it.
I don't know why, but for some reason, I think it's still going to be an issue.
Yes.
I still think it's going to be an issue. And when we think DUI,
maybe more so than it is now.
Yeah, well, when we start talking about DUI, everybody thinks alcohol, but it could also be drugs, and I think marijuana is going to be one of those issues. Not that it hadn't been around for years, but as people now see it to kind of normalize in society, I just think there's going to be more of it, and I think somebody's going to be inclined to get behind the wheel. And if you're on a motorcycle, you got to understand the person operating that car in front of you or beside you may be that person, and
right.
You got to be careful. So probably in the springtime, we'll probably come back to this topic.
Right, and frankly, it's part of you hear it referred to now pretty much exclusively as DUI, which is driving under the influence, which is under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, methamphetamines, cocaine, any type of, it could be a prescription medication that you've taken too much of or that you shouldn't be driving with. And it used to be DWI, driving while intoxicated, which everybody took as being alcohol. You can be intoxicated from other substances, but they just seem to be more, and I think that's part of the reason why they changed the acronym to DUI from that standpoint. But yes, driving under the influence of any type of substance. Another aspect on the reckless driving is driving distracted.
Yeah.
Looking at your phone, texting while you're driving down the roadway is extremely dangerous to everybody. Again, kind of like the same with the driving under the influence. Distracted driving is dangerous to everybody on the roadway, but especially for motorcyclists, when they're out on the roadway, if you're driving, if you're texting while you're driving and not paying attention, you can cause serious problems for motorcyclists. You weave into their lane and cause them to take evasive action or something of that nature, and it can be very devastating for somebody else.
Yeah, one of the last tractor trailer episodes that we did, we talked about not only drunk driving or driving under the influence and distracted driving, but we talked about drowsy driving, where they're just they're and that can happen for somebody in a car who's just tired. Maybe they've had a long shift at work, maybe they worked a little overtime or whatever. Maybe it's a mom who's been up with the kids since early, and they're just trying to get home, and you get drowsy driving. And again, that's another factor that a motorcyclist obviously has to be aware of.
Correct, exactly, and you've got to be very careful from that. If you're operating a motor vehicle, if you are drowsy for any reason, take precautions. Stop driving and do what you can, but don't drive distracted or under the influence. So.
Yep, absolutely. Jeff, let's transition over to another cause of motorcycle accidents, which is just sudden stops. These are things that you don't plan for, but you're riding behind a car, and all of a sudden that car, slams on its brakes, and you just don't have the reaction time.
Exactly, and unfortunately, I've seen this in my career as well, where a motorcyclist, you're on a 4-lane road driving and down the interstate, and all of a sudden you come up on there's a collision, and so traffic is backed up to a complete stop, or there's road construction that's causing traffic to back up and come to a complete stop, and the motorcyclist comes to a complete stop, no problem whatsoever. Because of the traffic stopped in front of them, but the vehicle behind is not paying the attention for whatever reason, and does not realize that the motorcyclist is coming to a stop, is slowing down frequently or fast because of the traffic in front of them, and then rear ends a motorcycle. And unfortunately, you can get the motorcyclist can get trapped between two vehicles in that type of collision, and it's just those are devastating when that type of thing occurs. And even especially now this time of the year, we've talked about farm equipment on the road before, but you got farm equipment moving from field to field that's going slow, and then they're turning into fields. And when a tractor combine is turning into a field, takes a long time, and the vehicles behind them frequently have to come to a stop for that, or slow way down because of that. And it's again the exact same situation. If the motorist behind the motorcycle isn't paying enough attention, you would hope they'd see the motorcyclist stop. If they're missing the motorcycle and they see the combine, they think they got a little more room, or that's going to clear, and then next thing you know, they've rear-ended the motorcyclist because they were looking at what's in front of the motorcyclist instead of the motorcyclists themselves, and not paying good attention to the road in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these little things that, again, most of the time if we're in a car, we're not thinking about, but if you're a motorcyclist or there's a motorcyclist around you, wow. I mean, it's dangerous. I've never driven a motorcycle by myself. I've been on a couple with friends and stuff, but it's just, wow. You never know what's going on in the car beside you. You've got to drive carefully.
You've got to practice defensive riding for sure when you're riding a motorcycle. Absolutely.
Well, and I tell you what, let's wrap up one of with the other common cause here. As you talk about defensive driving, car doors opening in a parking lot. I mean, this is whack-a-mole. I mean, this is difficult.
It is. People don't think about this, and luckily I was able to avoid the collision. But this has happened to me more than one time. One time when I was fairly young, I can still remember it's Kentucky Oaks Mall. Me and a friend were over there, and somebody pulled up in the fire lane. And of course, the roadway is right there. Travel lane is right there in front by the fire lane. It's that way at most stores with parking lots, big stores. Most malls are that way. Walmart here is that way. I was going down there. The car pulled up in the fire lane and just swung their car door open. Well, actually, the car was sitting there. It was already sitting there in the fire lane. They didn't pull up. They were already parked. I didn't know there was anybody in it. Next thing I know, the car door opens up in front of me, and luckily my luckily, the person I was riding with wasn't riding right beside me because I instinctively swerved
Yeah.
to avoid
Yeah.
hitting that car door that was now right in front of my path, and was able to swerve. And my friend was far enough behind me it didn't affect them because they were further left from that standpoint. But that was and I've seen those type where collisions have occurred, and the motorcyclist hits the car door and goes flying over, and first the car shouldn't be pulling up and stopping in the fire lane anyway, but it's something I see all the time, and it can be if you do that, don't do it. You're not supposed to be doing it. Pull into a parking spot. Like you're supposed to, but if you do that, don't swing your door open like that. Check and make sure it's going to be safe for before you open up that door to get out of the vehicle, because you could cause serious injury to someone.
Well, in another issue with the parking lots, the people backing out and not looking.
Correct.
And sometimes I've had this where I've had a large vehicle on my right side and I'm backing out. And I can't see around them, so I can't really see what's coming. And if there's a motorcyclist out there and you're coming out a little bit quicker than you should, you're going to cause some accidents.
Yeah. Exactly, that's going to happen. You have some vehicles now on the roadway that have the rear sensors and all of that that can help out to some extent from that. But you're exactly right. If you got a big truck sitting beside you that you can't see around when you go back up, and we all have to. You got to back out at some point in time. You can't just sit there forever and wait. But and I do it. I will start easing back very slowly. So if anybody's coming up that way, they can see my vehicle coming out. Hopefully, realize I can't see them, and until I get far enough back that I can see. And it's just, but it can be, if you're going slow enough, the motorcyclist can see it and avoid, and everything be fine from that standpoint. But like you say, if you just gun it when you're backing out, you could back out in front of a car, motorcyclist, pedestrian that's there with that, and then you can cause somebody injury. So you got to be very careful in that sense.
See, I think that's why they made the tailpipe so loud on a motorcycle. If you can't see me, maybe at least you'll hear me, right? So just don't do it at 6 o'clock in the morning in the neighborhood.
Yes.
But it's like that. Jeff, in the past 32 years, you've handled a lot of motorcycle accidents, and unfortunately, you get into some very catastrophic injuries. I mean, from traffic fatalities to traumatic brain injuries, TBI, as we've talked about in the past, to paralysis, to
multiple fractures,
and a lot of different things here. If someone has been in a motorcycle accident, or their family member's been in an accident, they need to talk to an attorney who actually understands, not just motor vehicle accidents, but understands what it's like to be on a bike. How do they get in touch with you?
Best way to reach me is to call. As we've mentioned before, I have an office in Murray and in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in Calloway and Christian County. But I have one phone number, so you can call 270-753-0053. You'll reach my office. If you reach it during normal business hours, you are most likely going to have a live person answer the phone for you. It's rare that all three of my lines are busy, or all three of my staff members are busy, and one of them can't answer the phone when the call comes in. So usually you will have a live person answer that phone call. Also have an 800 number if you're outside the area and you want to use the 800 number. It's 1-800-844-5108 from there. And that's the best way to reach me, is by phone. You can reach out through my website. You can email me at jeff@jeffrobertslaw.com. Website is jeffrobertslaw.com. And you can reach out to me that way. But during business hours, phone calls, best way to reach me.
And Jeff, you don't just handle Western Kentucky accidents. I mean, you handle cases all over the Commonwealth, and that's the one thing about this area of law, is that you really can handle a case up in Louisville, up in Jefferson County. You can handle a case over in Bowling Green, in Fayette County, over in Lexington, and you've actually done cases over in Northern Kentucky as well. And I know you're up in our area fairly often, but also Central and Eastern Kentucky. And if this is a catastrophic accident like this, a gentleman who's had, this many years of experience, taking on these cases, and you're going to be working directly with Jeff, that might be a reason to call and at least talk about it.
True. I do handle cases all over Kentucky from that standpoint. I've handled cases in eastern Kentucky. I've handled cases up in the Covington area, northern Kentucky. I've got several cases in Jefferson County now going on.
It's because they don't have enough attorneys in Jefferson County, right?
Actually, most of those attorneys were referrals from other attorneys that told the person to reach out to me, even though I'm not in Jefferson County. It was cases that those attorneys didn't handle. They were familiar with me, familiar with my reputation, so they advised the person to reach out to me. Several cases in Bowling Green area as well going on at this point in time. And, the majority of my cases are usually in the western Kentucky area, but I handle cases all over the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Outstanding. Well, as we said at the outset, we've still got a couple of months here before the weather gets too bad, and there's still going to be motorcycles out there. There's still going to be a good chance to get out there and enjoy the roadways. But,
even in wintertime when it's a nice day, motorcyclists are going to be out there on the roadway.
Yeah.
I understand you don't see them as frequently then, but I've ridden in January and February before on nice warm days.
As long as the roads are good,
Yeah. I don't ride a motorcycle when there's ice on the road. That's
right.
I have one time, but it was an accident.
That's a different kind of living.
The ice was not on the road when I left.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was going to be on the road when I come back. But that's only happened to me one time, and I'm said that won't never happen the second time.
No. Wait, who wants to drive on marbles?
Yeah. Luckily, there was a lane that didn't have any ice on it when I was coming home from work that day.
Yeah.
So.
Good deal. Well, Jeff, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. We'll be back here in about 2 weeks to do a couple more episodes for you. But I would encourage you to visit the website. You'll be able to find all of these different podcasts out there. We're on episode 87, I believe it is today. And there's a wealth of information. And Jeff's done a really nice job of being very conversational about complex areas of law that make it a little bit easier to understand and kind of allow you to get an idea of how he thinks and kind of how he approaches things. And I think you'll find if you've been in a serious accident and you need an attorney who's got 30-something years worth of experience and a very fine reputation, give him a call. There's no cost to call you, right, Jeff? I mean, you have a free consultation for injury clients.
Yes. You call my office, and the initial appointment is always there's no cost to the initial appointment. In fact, the vast majority of the cases I handle, 95+% of the cases I handle are on a contingency fee basis. Car wrecks, motorcycle wrecks, all of that are always handled on a contingency fee, which means I don't get paid until the end of the case when I put money in my client's pocket.
Outstanding. Well, Jeff, it's always good to see you, and we'll be back here, like I said, in about 2 weeks or so.
Good to see you, Jim.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.